If you want to participate, contact me at ordinarywomenpodcast@gmail.com. I'm sure you have great projects to brag about. You can also follow me and message me on Instagram at Ordinary Women Podcast, on Twitter at Ordinary Women PC, or on Facebook on the page Ordinary Women. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Ordinary Women. Hi Lynn, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you, Lucy?
I'm very good, thank you. Very excited to have you here today. Can you start by giving us a quick introduction of yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Lynn. I am an Asian Canadian who is currently living in Germany. So it kind of makes things a little bit confusing. I have a corporate background, but 4 years ago I put all of that behind me. I decided to leave my corporate life and find myself. And so, 4 years later, I am now a transformational coach and intuitive eating counselor. And yeah, so like I mentioned, I'm based in Berlin, Germany, but I am currently in Toronto for a wee staycation, workcation. I don't know what you want to call it.
Sounds amazing. When did you move to Germany?
I moved to Germany about 8.5 years ago. It started off as it was supposed to be a year-long adventure. I wanted to live in Europe and decided that Germany was going to be it because someone had told me that Berlin was amazing and that, they spoke English there. And I was just like, yeah, cool. That fits all my criteria. So I moved there. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have a job. I didn't know a lick of German. But decided to just do it and see what happened. And 8.5 years later, I'm still there.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Congrats.
Thank you.
And can you tell us something unusual about yourself?
Something unusual about myself. So for a couple of years when I was still living in Toronto, so this was about like 12 years ago, I was kind of living a double life. So like during the day, I was working in the finance industry, and at nighttime, I was a burlesque dancer. So it was as different as you could possibly get, and it was kind of awesome. It was kind of like I was leading this kind of like boring 9 to 5 life, and then at nighttime it was very glamorous, with like feather boas and sparkles and sequins and high heels, and it was wonderful. And I think for a long time I kind of tried to keep that side of my life secret because it was kind of like a little bit naughty. But yeah, that's I think an interesting tidbit about me that not a lot of people know.
That's awesome. You're the first burlesque dancer I'm like meet. That's so cool. How did you start to dance?
Yeah, so I have always wanted to do dance lessons. When I was a kid, like my parents like didn't have it even on their radar that that they should put their kids into like extracurricular activities. So I grew up with like just focusing on school and like helping out at my parents' restaurant. And then so when I got older, I realized that I needed to have a form of expression, and I really loved movement. Like I really loved working out. I loved going to boxing and doing yoga, but I wanted to pursue other forms of movement, and I started doing dance classes. So I started doing like all the dance classes that I had wanted to do when I was younger, was a young kid. So I was doing contemporary and like, a little bit of jazz, some ballet, and I was watching all of these dancing shows on TV, and I was just like, yes, I'm gonna be one of those. But dance is so hard. Like it's so disciplined, and like I can totally see why like, parents start their kids really, really young. But through all of these different forms of movement, I realized that I liked the sensual movements. Like I like the sexy kind of like speaking with my body in a different way than what we see on TV kind of thing. And so I started doing like pole dancing classes, and I started doing like burlesque classes, and I found a professional burlesque performer in Toronto who was doing classes, and I started like doing her classes regularly. And then at one point she asked me if I wanted to become one of her like backup dancers, and I was like, yes, please. And then it kind of like snowballed from there. So that's how I got into burlesque.
Awesome. This is so cool. Did you ever tell any of your coworkers or anyone in your life there?
Yeah. I only told a handful of people, like my closest, like the people I was closest to, like the people who I was actually friends with. But like in terms of like my boss and like, the colleagues who were, who I wasn't so close to, no, I didn't say anything to them because I don't know, I was always afraid that they would judge me. But then I don't know, it was something that I was like really proud of doing. So looking back, I'm kind of like, I kind of wish I had told people because like, it was like me hiding a part of myself, which, I think is a bit of a shame, right? Like I fully endorse, showing as much of yourself as possible to the world because I think the world needs it. But yeah, but that's something that I've learned kind of like along the way to be more authentic.
So that's so interesting. That's so cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And as obviously here we talk a lot about being a woman, I like to start by asking, was there a moment in your life when you realized that you are a woman?
Ooh, that is that's a very open question. Like, there are so many different phases. Like, there are different parts of our lives where we're reminded of the fact that we are different from, right? Like, that we're different from men. Like, so, I'm thinking obviously like the first time I got my period, for example, or like even like leading up, that time leading up to getting my first period and being like, oh, yes, this makes me a woman. I think that would be probably the first example. But I think when I got into burlesque, that was another time when I was really like, this is what it means to be a woman, because I think I finally felt like I was coming into my femininity a bit more and coming into my sexuality a bit more. Um, so yeah, I would say that those 2 points in my life were pivotal moments where, like, there's a biological aspect of being a woman, but then there's like also like, I don't know, the other aspect of like actually fully being like, I don't know, I just felt like I was like finally like this is being a woman. Like I think for me it has a lot to do with like sexuality as well. And burlesque allowed me to kind of explore that aspect of it.
Yeah, like embracing yourself in a way.
Yeah, it also like being able to experiment and like to kind of like, like move my body. Like, what can my body do? Like, how can I incorporate what the different kinds of movement that I've had before, like in terms of yoga and stuff. How can I incorporate that into like, performing and like expressing myself in a way that, when you're in front of an audience, right? Like you want to entertain, you want to entice, you want to like make them desire you or like aspire to be you. So it was, I think the experimentation for me was really important in me fully coming into myself as a woman.
That's so cool. So great. And did
Hmm.
you grow up with any female role model?
Um, yeah, I definitely did. I mean, like my female role model, like, I was thinking about this yesterday, and the first person who comes up for me is my mom, right? Like my mom is the person who showed me like what hard work looks like. Like she's had some tough times. Like, we grew up as an immigrant family in small town Ontario, Canada. My parents were refugees of the Vietnam War. They ended up in a refugee camp in Hong Kong, which is about the same time that I was born. And so, they made their way to Canada eventually, and my mom had to take care of 2 kids, and work a job, put food on the table, make money, and all that stuff. She didn't have time to learn English. Like, she had to like stay home and take care of the kids. Where my dad was, like, he was the one who got to go to school and like, learn the English language and learn to drive, and it was like a separation of duties kind of thing. And so like even to this day, like my parents own a restaurant, and like my mom is still like the hardest working woman that I know for sure. Like she'll get up at like 8 in the morning, and she will get home at like, I don't know, like 9 or 10 at night, after a full day at the restaurant of prepping and like cooking and like cleaning and doing all of that stuff that, restaurant owners have to do. And I'm just so amazed, and like, but now, like, now that I know a bit about like psychology, and I'm in the wellness industry now. Like I see her as an example of like generational trauma, and like what happens when you can't stop, and like I don't know, like it just like she's just so amazing to me. But like I also want to like teach her how to unlearn all of that. Like it's like, mom, you don't need to work so hard. You're 60 now. You don't have to work so hard. You can actually stop and rest. So I think I get a lot of my work ethic from her. Like she was my role model. She was like the one who like even during tough times, like she would just get on with it, just do it, and like you know at the end of the day, she could just finally like sit down and relax and be with her family. But even then, it wasn't just like relaxing; like it was her like still taking care of us. So yeah, that was a really long answer.
No, 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 that makes like that, yeah. And do your parents know that you're doing burlesque? I guess that's not like the expected.
No, I mean my mom did. I think at one point my sister showed her a video, and mom was just like, "Oh my gosh, like Lynn, what are you doing?" But like she didn't reject me, right? Like she didn't like disown me and tell me not to ever do it again. I think that she appreciated the fact that like this was a form of expression for me. Um, so yeah, like my parents are cool that way. I don't think my dad ever knew. I would never tell my dad. Like that would be weird on like multiple levels.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, I don't need my dad to know that I'm like, like twirling my titties and shaking my
Yeah,
ass in front of like a full room of people.
fair enough. And what do you think your mom taught you? I mean, I guess we talked a little bit about that already, but yeah.
She taught me how to like, I mean, yeah, like my whole work ethic is from her, right? Like she taught me how to work hard. Um, Almost to the detriment of myself, right? Like, now I've done years of therapy and I'm a coach. And so like I fully endorse people resting, that is also being productive. But there's that voice in my head sometimes when I'm like, okay, I'm trying to rest, like I'm trying to like get my energy, so that I can like do more later. There's definitely that voice in my head that's like, oh no, you can't do that, Lynn. Like you're lazy, or I'll feel guilty about doing it because I'm like, my mom doesn't rest. Like, why do I rest? So there's a lot of guilt in it. But I mean, that's just that's what she taught me. Like that's kind of what she did. And it wasn't like her telling me like you need to work hard to get what I want. It was like just by watching her, right? Like just like working so hard, like busting her ass every day, like and she doesn't trust other people, like like she still chops onions and like chops like all the vegetable. Like she does all the prep work. Like this is something that they can totally hire someone to do. But my mom is like, no, like I'm self-sufficient. I can do this. Like I can still do this. And I have that same mentality. So she kind of taught me like if I have the ability to do it, like to just do it and like to do it myself, because like that's the best way to like to know that it's going to get done. But again, like it's almost, I'm trying to relearn it so that it's better for my mental health and for my physical health. But it's very difficult because like that's what I grew up with. That's what I grew up seeing and still continue to see. Like every time I go home now, I'm just like, mom, like you need to stop. Like, but anytime she takes a day off, like she'll like injure herself or like get sick or something. It's almost like her body is like, oh, here's like some room to breathe. Like let's like do all of the things that we haven't had time to do because this woman keeps like being on her feet and stuff. So um yeah, so she's kind of taught me how like to what hard work is, and what persistence is, um much to my detriment.
Yeah, I'm glad if you can find more balance in what works for you now. That's so important to learn.
Yeah, absolutely, especially with this capitalistic society, right? Like we're
Definitely.
and like that's like such a huge difference between Germany and Canada, is the fact that like in Canada, I mean, it's standard to have what like 10 vacation days or something, And like that's normal to have 10. I think 15 is good, and it's just like, wait, what? And while in Germany, I think they start at like 24, or something like that. And it's just like, like my mom's mentality of like doing work, like it just feeds so well into this like capitalistic structure of like you need to work, 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 because like that's where your value is.
That's so. I don't have the word. I recently learned that actually. I didn't know that it was my colleagues in the US who told me I think they have 19 days of holidays with our company, and they were so happy because for them it's so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so shocked. I was so, especially as a French person, where like
Mm-hmm.
you know that they battle to have the 5 weeks of holidays, and like it's like 19 days. You think is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. You should ask them about their maternity leave.
Oh my god, yeah.
Yeah, that's like another mind boggler. It's like, what? Like, get 6 weeks? I think it's 6 weeks or something. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, how do you live? Like, how do you,
Literally,
yeah.
I don't get it. You don't leave. You produce. You're here to serve the system and work.
Mm.
It's mind blowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And do you currently have any female role model?
I mean, I would still say my mom, even though she doesn't do everything perfectly. Like, um, but I think I admire women who, yeah, because that's something I strive for, right? Like I strive to have balance in my life. And so anyone who attempts to have balance with like their professional life and their family life, their personal relationships, like, but I can't really think of anyone off the top of my head because it's so freaking difficult for women to do that. Um, Also recently, like I've just been really in awe of mothers in general. Like not just my mom, but like just mothers in general because I see how freaking hard work it is. Like I do not want to have children. I do not plan on having children. Like it's not something that I've wanted. But like so many of my friends are moms now and it's such hard work. And the fact that they have to do that plus have like oftentimes a full-time job or even a part-time job and they have to like keep the house in order and they have to like maintain their relationship and have like social interactions. I'm just like blown away by that. Like holy cow, like I feel like yeah, I think women who generally like take on different roles and like juggling different roles, like those are my role models because like holy shit, like I'm an entrepreneur. I have like a romantic relationship, I have a lot of friendships. I maintain my familial relationships, like, and that is hard, right? Like that is hard, but like, and then you throw motherhood into it and I'm just like, oh no, like this is just a reminder of why I don't want to become a mom.
Yeah, it's so like I feel the same way. I don't want children, and part of it is because like I already struggle to find time to do everything I want to do. Adding children?
Yeah.
Like, no, never, ever in my life.
And it's like, and it's not like, oh, I have to keep this person alive. It's like, oh, I have to keep this person alive and I have to raise a good person.
Yeah,
Like that's a lot, right? Like,
completely. I struggle to do that with myself.
I know it's like it's so much. I'm just like before this interview, I went and walked my sister's dog, and I was just like, oh my god, like I need to get this dog going. Like like I need to get home so I can be on time. And I was just like, this is just a dog. Like I could literally pick this dog up and like carry her if I needed to. But like with a child, like they have a mind of their own, right? Like it's oh my
Yeah,
god. I don't know how moms do it or dads. I mean, like let's give credit to dads too, right? But
yeah,
holy shit, yeah.
yeah, no, completely.
Yeah.
And do you think the lack of representation of women in society had an impact on you?
For me, it's not just like lack of representation of women, it was also the lack of representation of Asian women. growing up, like not seeing women in senior management roles was one thing. Like, you would kind of see like the random, like the very rare women in senior management. But you would like even more rarely see Asian women in senior management. And so that wasn't even a thing that I even considered growing up. So that's not really something, I don't think that really affected me, especially because like I was never one to like want to climb the career ladder or like, get into senior management myself. Where the lack of representation really affected me was like more in my personal life, because there was so little representation of women who looked like me in media, right? Like in like magazine covers or like movie roles or advertisements. So that's where it affected me, because it kind of made me feel as if I was invisible, like, that like I had to be white in order to like have any sort of value for people to actually want to see me and like value me and like deem me worthy. An example is when Netflix came out with a movie a few years ago called To All the Boys I Loved Before. It really affected me, this movie, because this was the first time I saw an Asian American woman, an Asian American teen actually, like talk about her high school crushes and like, the story about getting together with one of them. And he happened to be a white guy. And so that story really affected me, because I was just like, oh, fuck, like I've never seen that before. Like I didn't know that it was possible for like an Asian American woman, for a woman who looked like me, to actually get the guy. So I think, I don't know, like nowadays I think like a lot of companies and like, media are making more of an effort to tell stories of everyone, not just like a certain demographic. And it really warms my heart to see. But like growing up, like, yeah, like that wasn't a thing. So growing up, I was very much like, like, oh, I like that guy, but he would never want me. Like, I don't look like anyone else. Why would he be interested in me? And that, like I carried that with me like as an adult, right? So thank God for therapy, though. Like, thank God for therapy for like helping me to unpack this, and for seeing like why I had this like mentality. So
That's so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, thank God for therapy.
honestly, thank God for like like people wanting to progress, right? Like for people pushing for diversity, and like like these companies and these filmmakers and stuff like wanting to like tell these stories now. So I mean, it's still not as frequent as it could be, especially in Europe. But yeah, baby steps, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'd like to jump on kind of the second part of this podcast and hear about a project or life achievement that you have that you're proud of and that you would like to talk about. Can you tell us like a bit what you want to talk about and like present what the project is?
Sure. So I mentioned that I'm self-employed. I guess that's kind of like my project at the moment. About 4 years ago, I quit my job. So I had a very, very stable job at a bank in Germany. And after 4 years of working there, I was just like, oof, I can't do this anymore. Like, I woke up one day and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I was really lacking in meaning in my day to day life. I was waking up in the mornings, going to work, coming home at night, and really did not feel fulfilled. I was like a risk manager, and I was like running reports every day or every month, actually submitting it to like the European Central Bank, and like working with the team, and it was, and like I was a team lead. Like it was just like, why am I doing this? Like I just was like, I can't do this anymore, and I decided to quit. And a lot of people were like, oh, like where are you going after? And I was just like, I don't know. And like a lot of people were like, oh, like that's very courageous of you to not know what your next step is. And I was just, and I like there was like part of me that was very much like, I need to get out of this situation so that I can think, so that I can breathe, so I can, make the next move that makes sense for me and not what other people are expecting of me. So I was really proud of that, in that like I was doing something that was not ordinary. I think a lot of people, and myself included, right? Like we want to be safe, we want to feel secure, we want to like have like financial stability. And thankfully, like I was able to be in a position where I could take that time off to really figure out what I wanted to do. And so now, as a self-employed person, I've like really found my way. Like I've like found meaning. So I work a lot with people who are struggling with being in ruts, who are stuck, who want more but don't know how to achieve it. So I started my company. It's called Bona Fide Life Coaching, and I named it Bona Fide Life because I really wanted to help people figure out what was authentic to them. We're so busy trying to achieve the next milestone, right? Like, once we graduate from university, we have to get a good job, and then getting the good job leads to like, oh, you should have a partner, so you should find a partner, and then when you have a partner, you get married and have kids and buy a house, and it's like this like whole roadmap that is set out for us. And very rarely do people stop and think, is this what I want? Does this suit me? Does this make me happy? I think a lot of times people are like on autopilot. They just do what is expected of them. And I want to help break that. And this is what I'm super proud of, that I am able to help facilitate this, to like have these conversations and to hold space for people. And part of what I do too is like around intuitive eating. And I feel like it fits really well because intuitive eating is really about listening to your body and what your body needs, right? Like a lot of us are brought up with the idea of like looking a certain way, of being a certain size, wearing certain things in order to be respectable and worthy. And like, the diet culture like plays heavily into that. And so people are constantly looking outside of themselves to validate them, like what do I weigh? Like how many macros did I eat today, or calories, or, like, oh my God, like what time did I eat? What time should I stop eating? Like, it's all of these things that are external. And so intuitive eating is really just bringing things back to highlighting what is going on inside of us. And it fits really nicely with the transformational coaching that I do, because it's really focusing on what you want. So if you can't even identify something as elemental as hunger, like that is something that we are all born with, like, identifying hunger. If we can't even identify that, like how are we expected to actually be able to decide what we want to do for our life, right? So that's something that I'm really, really proud of myself for doing, to like breaking away, number one, from corporate life and what was safe and what was expected of me, but then also going like the extra step of actually helping people figure out what they want. But yeah, that's what I'm proud of.
Yeah, that's like so much to be proud of. That's super cool. Yeah, and how was there between the first time that you thought about it and then the first steps that you took?
No. So when I quit my job, I actually had absolutely zero idea of what I wanted to do. I just knew that what I was doing was not it. I was just like, nope, this isn't it. I can't take this anymore. So I'm just going to take the time and like figure it out. And I actually went through another job. I became a project manager for an IT consulting company very briefly, because I thought, oh, like I can do project management. Like, like I have good communication skills. I'm organized. Like I can totally do this. And it ended up becoming something completely different from what I expected. So, there was like some exploration in there as well. Like I see things happening as an opportunity to learn more about myself. And so even though the project management position didn't work out the way I'd expected it, like, I could take that opportunity and look at it and be like, okay, what did I learn from this? What do I actually like from this? And what it came down to was like, oh, I actually really like interacting with people. And I've always known this about myself, but I didn't know how I could do more of it. And, when I first quit my job at the bank, like I had a panic attack and I was just like, oh crap, like I'm kind of in trouble. Like I don't know where I'm going. I'm a little bit directionless. I need help. And that's when I started doing therapy. And that's where I started really learning about myself, right? And through therapy, I realized like, oh, this is the kind of work that I want to do. Like I want to help people figure themselves out. I want to help people learn more about themselves. Like it's such a powerful thing to be able to do, right? So I wanted more of it, and so that's when I got into coaching, and I trained as a coach. I decided to train as a coach after my project management role ended, and coincidentally, it was at the same time that that lockdown started. So I was able to just fully just throw myself into coaching, and like realizing like, oh yeah, this is totally what I want.
So cool. That's so brave to quit a job and yeah, not knowing what's next. Because
Yeah.
yeah, you still need to pay your rent, unfortunately. And yeah, that's super brave. I'm so happy for you. And how did you do it?
Looking back, I think part of building my practice was being absolutely ignorant of what was needed. And I say that because like I look back and I just remember being like I just remember the optimistic, like happy-go-lucky, like I still am these things, but like I just had zero idea of what was needed to be an entrepreneur, a small business owner, right? Like before I started, like I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna get my coaching training. I'm gonna become a coach. I'm gonna pass my the requirements, and then I'm gonna have a successful business. And so these were the four steps that I needed to like have my practice. And it wasn't until I actually started doing it, like when I got to the point where I was like, okay, time to have a successful practice. And then I was just like, oh shit, like there's so many things I need to do. I didn't consider any of these things. I didn't consider that I have to do some marketing. I didn't consider that I kind of like have to do like that I definitely have to do sales. How do I generate leads? How do I build a website? Like all of these things, like I just kind of like blissfully did not know I had to do. So I kind of went into it like just blind. Like I just had no idea. And so I've just kind of been doing it step by step. Because I really think that if I did know, like I think that would have stopped me. Like I feel like if I knew all of the things that building your own business entailed, I feel like that would have overwhelmed me and that would have just like I would have probably talked myself out of it. So I'm happy that I have this. It's like moving to Germany, right? Like I was just like, oh, I have this visa. Like I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna go and do it. And that's the same mentality that I had with my business. I was just like, I'm just gonna have a successful business. And then it's like, oh, but I have to do all of these things. Like, how am I gonna get clients? Oh, I guess I need to learn how to generate leads. I think that's just generally how I approach things. I kind of don't know all of the details to things. Like I kind of just like gloss over all the details and then I just throw myself into it. So it's like when I moved to Germany when I was just um, I had a visa and I decided to move there. The idea was to move there for a year, figure out my job situation when I got there, figure out the friend situation when I got there, just do everything as I go along. And so that's the mentality that I usually bring to everything I do, including building my own business. Just like having to learn things as I go along. I'm not really one to have like a plan because I feel like plans, you can spend all the time in the world on a plan and make it as meticulous as you want, but things will always happen in life that will kind of like distract you or like force you off onto like a detour. So for me, I'm kind of like, I'll just figure it out as I go.
This is so true. Yeah, it's always like everything is happening.
Yeah, and you can't expect things, right? And like,
Yeah.
and then like, like I mentioned, like everything I do is an opportunity to learn about myself. And so if I plan for stuff, down to the finest detail, like it kind of doesn't allow me to like breathe and reflect on like what I've done or how far I've come and like how I can change things. But that's just me. Like I feel like I have a lot of friends who are planners and, totally think that I'm absolute bonkers for working the way I do.
I love that. um and yeah, you mentioned all the things that you had to do and that sounds like you had so much to do. Was there anyone who helped you or who had an impact on all of this project?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Absolutely. Like I could not do this alone. Um, Definitely like on a personal level, like just having friends and family like know what I'm doing, like just to have their support, like that was super helpful. Also having coaches, like having my own coaches, like set goals for myself, or there were a couple of like group coaching programs that I was on that really like helped me become clear on who I wanted to work with. To be clear on like the inner voices in my head that were going to stop me from doing the things that I wanted to do, to tell me that I wasn't good enough or tell me that I was going to fail, like to be really, really aware of those characters. So like coaches, friends. Also, I have an accountability partner. I've had an accountability partner, I think, since like April of last year. We meet once a week to talk about, our wins, like what did we do during the week that we're really proud of, but also like what can we do or what will we do in the next week, and then we check in the following week and like do the same thing all over again. And like that's been really helpful, to be able to say, hey, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And then have someone be like, okay, did you do it? Like I work really, really well with accountability partners. But this one in particular, she's in the same position that I'm in. Like, we were in the same coaching cohort. And we like started building our company, at the same time. And so like we both understand what the other is going through, and we can kind of like encourage each other and like, like question each other when it's necessary. So that's been really helpful in building my business. And being a small business owner, like I'm literally the only person in my business. So it starts with me, but it also stops with me. It can be very lonely, right? So it's vital for me to be able to reach out to people, to my network of friends and colleagues, and people who have done this before. I can go to them for advice. Having a supervisor is super important. Someone that I can like go to, like to talk about difficult cases, or even like, how did you build your business? Like, what can I do here? It's having those conversations and being open to feedback. Like I cannot do this by myself. I think there was a period in my life when I was like, super quote unquote independent, and I didn't need anyone, and I had this idea that like, if I opened myself up, people would just disappoint me. But I'm happy to say that I've moved past that, and it's a lot easier to be able to share this with other people. So definitely. And also my parents. Like my parents are freaking cool. Like I thought that they would freak out about me not having a full-time job, not working at a bank anymore, not having security, but they've been super supportive, telling me that like if I needed any sort of help, like let them know. And it's really awesome.
That's so good. It sounds like you have a very strong and important support system, just so great and important. That's super cool. And what challenges have you faced?
I mean, there's so many. Like from the voices in my head telling me like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" But then having that offset with like, "Oh no, this is my purpose. Like this is what I want to do. Like this is how I'm going to help change the world." Like it helps balance that out. But sometimes that little voice, like that's a challenge sometimes, when that voice is like, "Ooh, you're being lazy. Like you're not doing enough." That tries to like drag me down. That's a challenge. From the business aspect of it, like getting clients. Like I remember when at my last job, I told one of my colleagues, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna like start my own coaching practice. And he was like, okay, so how are you gonna have clients? And I was like, oh, I'm just gonna like post on Facebook and Instagram. And I was, like, and looking back, I was like, oh shit, like that was basic way of thinking. Like I just thought I could just post on Instagram and people would want to come and work with me, and spend hundreds of euros, possibly thousands of euros, like investing in themselves. And it's not so easy, right? Like, so from the business aspect of it, there's a lot more that goes into marketing and getting clients than just a simple post on Instagram and Facebook. So that's something that I've had to learn. What other challenges have there been? I mean, when you start out with a company, like the financial challenges of it, that's another thing. You know, the lure of getting a full-time job to like offset, like to pay those expenses is pretty strong. But I'm happy to say that I still like I'm just like chipping away at it, right? Like it's kind of identifying those challenges and then just like how can I slowly get to where I want to go. So in terms of like getting clients, for example, it's like having conversations. It's just a conversation at a time, right? Like it's not going to happen overnight. It's building these relationships. And so I'm at the point where I feel like as long as I'm doing something, push the needle forward, as long as I'm, um, you know, um, progressing in some way, like I'm happy. Because I fully recognize that, yeah, this doesn't happen overnight. Before I started, people were like, oh, it's going to take you at least a couple of years to build your business. And I was just like, no, just watch me. I'm Lynn. I can do this. It's going to be like so easy. And, having to eat some humble pie to be able to acknowledge that, hey, like I actually need to put in work. And it's baby steps.
So good to hear that you're doing the work and it sounds like you're overcoming all these challenges. And was there anything that was easier than you thought it would have been?
The coaching, like the actual coaching itself was easier. Like I remember going into my first lesson or like training session, and I was just like, "Fuck!" Like I really hope I don't fuck anyone up. Like I just don't want to fuck anyone up. Like that was my like
Fair
number
enough.
one like goal. Yeah, like I just didn't want to mess anyone up. Like I didn't want to make them worse than what they than when they started coming to me. Um, but for me, like that's the easy part. Like that's the part that I love. Like that's the like having those conversations and creating that space for people. Like that's why I keep doing what I do. Like this is why I keep chipping away. Like even with the challenges, even with like the uncertainty of like having a small business. Like this is why I keep doing it because the coaching part is the easy part for me.
This is so cool. I think I'm done with my questions, so we're gonna come to the conclusion of this episode. Before that, is there like where can anyone who's listening find information if they want to have you as a coach?
Okay. So you can find me on my website. So my website, it's a long one, is bonafide.lifecoaching.com. My Instagram is at bona.fide.life. And I believe I'm also on TikTok and on Facebook. But perhaps I can send you that information and you can include it in the comments,
Yeah,
maybe.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I've started doing uh, something called the Body Beautiful Circle. So that's like once a month. It's like the third Sunday of every month. And it's a small, intimate group online that come together and we celebrate our bodies and we celebrate ourselves and, while talking about our challenges that we have like around food and our bodies. So that's something else that people can check me out on. But yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing a part of your story and your time with me and everyone who's listening. Is there anything that we haven't talked about during our discussion and that you'd like to mention now?
I think we've covered everything. I think I kind of ramble on a lot, so I'm sure like there's like stuff that came up naturally. So, but for now, I don't think there's anything that I would want to bring up. I think everything's been covered. Thank you.
Perfect. Then thank you so much again for your time and sharing uh, here with me. And as always, in this podcast, the guest gets the very last word, so the mic is yours.
Yeah, I just want to tell everyone to be themselves. Be yourself. You are enough. You are not too much. You are loved. You are seen. Just be yourself. Thank you so much.